there, this is Ross Izzard. This is the Backcountry Fly Fishing Podcast, where we talk about fly fishing gear made for the backcountry. So in keeping with our theme of interviews toward the back half of the season, we've got another interview for you today, this time with Patrick Bowman. He's the founder and CEO of Colter Backcountry, and Daniel Bowman, who is his brother, as you might have guessed, and the chief fishing officer at Colter Backcountry. For those of you who don't follow these two guys, they spend a lot of time, as you might expect, out there in the backcountry chasing various types of fish and an awful lot of experience backpacking, including through hiking the entire Continental Divide Trail, which is like 3,000 miles long. So that's no small thing. So these guys have been outside a lot. They spend a lot of time fishing. I think I saw somewhere that Patrick is trying to fish for 200 days straight this year or something, which is crazy even by my standards. And I'm pretty crazy about fly fishing. So they spend some time out there, and anybody who spends some time out there knows, even though you can stitch together a gear system that works for you, and I talk a lot about that on the show, it's never really quite as thoughtful as it could be from a fishing perspective, right? You can stitch together hiking gear and backpacking gear and camping gear and fly fishing gear and a whole bunch of other stuff that's made for various activities into something that works and is cohesive. I mean, I've managed to do that over the years, but it's never quite ideal. And these two guys have done some really tremendous work thinking about at least some of the problems that fly anglers have when they're trying to pack into the backcountry to chase trout, and coming up with some really interesting solutions as far as how you carry your net or where you keep your flies or a whole bunch of other things. So they're really an interesting pair with a lot of experience in the backcountry, a really deep passion for fly fishing, and I think a pretty keen mind for what's needed to help this sort of growing community of backcountry fly anglers get out there with the gear and the equipment that they need to make the hike better, to make the camping experience better, and to ultimately make the fishing a little bit better once you're off there in the bush. So I'm happy to have them on here. I think it's a really good interview. I think you're going to enjoy it. And with that said, we'll go ahead and jump in. All right. So we are here today with Patrick Bowman and Daniel Bowman from Colter Backcountry. I have been following these guys on Instagram for quite a while because, first of all, they get into some pretty cool stuff and it's fun to watch. And second of all, they're out there trying to solve one of my great problems, which is that nobody makes any decent gear for this backcountry fly fishing thing. They make gear for backpacking and hiking and fly fishing, and then it's our job to glue all of that shit together in a way that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. So I really appreciated watching what you guys are doing. Thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Well, I tell you what, since we've got both of you, and you're brothers, right?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Okay, who's the big brother?
I'm the older. I'm Patrick.
Okay.
I'm the younger, Daniel. Yep.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I tell you what, whichever one of you wants to go first, maybe you could give us just a quick intro and tell us your story about how you got into fly fishing, and then more specifically, how you got into this crazy backcountry fly fishing thing.
Yeah, so Danny and I, we've been fishing, since we were tiny kids. We grew up doing a ton of fishing all summer. I think maybe around the time I was 10 or so, we first got into the fly game. Kind of quickly became addicted to throwing flies and just doing fly fishing in general. As we got older, started getting more into the backcountry angle of things. We bunch of backpacking, bunch of camping. Back in 2021, kind of when the business started to take shape in our heads, we did a through hike of the Continental Divide Trail. So that goes from New Mexico up to the border of Canada and Montana. And basically, it got heavily exposed to sort of the ultralight game and backpacking, and kind of loved a lot of the ethos around that of just carrying less, being minimalist. And our favorite type of fishing is backcountry fishing. We like to get places that are hard to reach. We like to fish that are unpressured. The journey along the way is amazing. And like you said in the intro, we basically felt like in the fly fishing industry, there's so much amazing gear out there, but there isn't really anyone who's catering specifically towards backcountry fishing. So, when you're hiking back, we had all these pain points. It's a pain in the ass to carry a net and strap it onto your backpack. It sucks to put waders in a backpack, or what do you do with your boots, or even just bringing your typical pack, hip pack, chest pack, or whatever. It takes up a huge amount of room in a backpack. And at the end of the day, you really don't need a lot of that stuff to effectively fish these areas. So we started Colter Backcountry with the goal of building out a product catalog that solved these pain points. We've got a couple products out now. We have a collapsible net. We have a minimalist little fishing wallet that clips on. That's great. A few tools in the pipeline we're coming out with this summer, but yeah, that's kind of the high level overview. We love backcountry fishing, and we're trying to build gear to get people out there.
So, I mean, the CDT through hike, that's a long hike, man. What is that? Remind me, is it 1,000 miles? Do I remember that right?
It's a little bit more. It's about 3,000 miles the whole length. So it took us about 5 months to do the whole thing. It's a haul for sure.
Yeah, that's wild. So, okay, so you jumped on the trail and then you hiked all the way through that thing in one go. So it's not, I mean, some people do it, but they through hike it like in sections, right? They go and then they go home for a bit and then come back and they do the next section. But you guys did the whole thing all the way through.
Yep. Continuous journey.
That's wild, man. Yeah, so I mean, I would imagine that you probably got quite a bit of respect for how much stuff you're carrying. Were you fishing while you were doing it? I know it's not exactly a fishing hike, but it does cross some pretty interesting areas and some lakes on the way.
Yeah, we were fishing when we could. There's a lot of pretty amazing water you go through. The tough thing on those kind of hikes is that you're pulling pretty big miles every day, so it's hard to carve out fishing time. But we brought some Tenkara rods with us, and definitely caught a few fish along the way.
All right, so we were talking about you doing the CDT trail all the way through. You were saying that you fished when you could on the way through, but maybe you could walk us through a little bit of the lessons that you learned. I mean, obviously you said that you got a connection with the ultralight universe. I mean, nothing makes you realize how much stuff you're carrying on you more than having to carry it on you every single day for for 5 months, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing you probably learned quite a bit of other stuff too. And I wonder if just while we're on the story, you have any other learning lessons there that influenced the formation of the company, or just stuff in general that you've taken with you into the backcountry after the fact.
Yeah, definitely. I'll jump in. Daniel will probably have some stuff to say too. I think
Yep.
big picture, like the biggest takeaway from a hike of that magnitude is just how far you can get on your own 2 feet. And I mean, it's pretty amazing if you put in a little work, like where you can actually get stuff that you might not think you can do, you totally can. And then also, like when you put that effort in, you can really get to places that are uncrowded, that there aren't people there, that are remote. I mean, that's kind of the stuff everyone hopes for when they go fishing, right? But we live in a day and age where there's a ton of people out fishing, which is awesome. A lot of crowded trailheads, but I really do believe that, like, no matter where you live, no matter what state you're in, even some of these crowded states across the West, like if you're willing to put in some miles and some good hard work, you can get to some sweet spots and have a lot of solitude still. And so just kind of learning that lesson the hard way through a long hike and a lot of miles is something I've carried with me. And just about anywhere I've gone, I've been able to beat the crowd, so to speak, just by doing some good hiking.
Yeah. So I'll add to that, the biggest thing of kind of getting these miles in and stuff is the kind of this ultralight route that we really worked on. And the most ultralight you can get is just to not bring something, right? Yeah, you don't need 3 pairs of pants or whatever. The less you take, the better. But when you want to accompany that with things like fishing, you really need to just have the right gear, the stuff that's going to be light enough, that's not going to really drag you down. And so the more stuff you can be ultralight on, the better your days will be overall. You're going to be carrying a lot less. You'll feel a lot better at the end of the day, have a lot more energy to fish, and it's kind of. So yeah, you want to be ultralight so that you can bring the things that you really care about, like fishing gear, if you want to go off.
Some of the a good thing I like to think about is when you're backpacking, a lot of people like to have comfort in camp, but it's a lot better, in my opinion, to have comfort on trail. In camp, you're going to be doing stuff, you're going to be out fishing. So, ditch the chair, ditch the stuff that makes camp a little more comfortable. And that way your hiking is going to be a lot more comfortable, kind of a better overall experience.
All right, so let me ask you about this, because I just did an episode not too long ago about packing for self-reliance, in which I said that I am not convinced that ultralight can really happen when you're fly fishing some of the time, if you want to be ready for it, right? And so I'm always curious, because I'm pretty ruthless about going through my pack and pulling out stuff I don't need, right? There's no chair in there. I do take an inflatable sleeping pad because I'm old and my back hurts if I try to sleep on one of those egg carton things. But otherwise, I mean, I strip out as much as I possibly can, and still, you throw in the fishing gear, like you guys said, it's probably 5 pounds with a fly bag and a rod tube and a couple of rods and a couple of reels. And it starts getting pretty heavy. So when you're talking ultralight, Tell me, like, if you're day hiking, what do you think that pack weighs? If you're backpacking, what do you think that pack weighs? And talk to me a little bit about some of the trade-offs. Like, what stuff are you leaving behind to stick with the ultralight ethos as you're fly fishing? Because I've largely just given up on it. I'm just like, well, I guess I should just go lift more weights because there's nothing else I feel I can take out of here. But I'd love to hear how you guys manage that system and how much weight you're carrying.
I mean, ultimately, it really depends on kind of the context of the trip, I think. So, obviously, like one of the biggest sources of weight's going to be like food. So depending on how long the trip is. So that's when you're doing just a day or an overnight, it's usually less important to worry too much about, cutting all your pounds because you're not carrying 12 pounds of food. But, when we were doing the CDT and stuff, you're going through usually 4 to 6 day segments and you're eating a lot of calories out there. So we were, I don't know, probably packing, yeah, sometimes at least 12 pounds of food and stuff. Sometimes there's some big water carries in there. So ultimately, we were really aiming for like a base pack weight around like 15 pounds. And then once you put the food and water on, at most, you're going to be in like the 35 pound range potentially with some bigger carries. And so that was with some very, very minimalist fishing stuff. Now, when you add full fly gear, obviously that adds a lot. And so that's a lot of what we're working on is trying to make sure that your base fly kit can be a whole lot lighter and more compact and that you're not going to need quite as much weight there.
Yeah, I'm as soon as we get off this call, I'm actually heading out on trail doing a 3-day trip in Rocky Mountain National Park fishing. And from a fishing perspective, pretty much all I bring is a single fly box. We have these things called a clip kit. It's basically like this fold-up fishing wallet, weighs a few ounces. That is basically just a handy little spot to store. I'll bring 2 spools of tippet, some floating, forceps, nippers, and then 1 reel. And then I do usually bring 2 rods backpacking, just in case you break one or, you have 2 setups going. So yeah, I mean, if anyone's listening to this out there who is like a ultralight backpacker that doesn't do a lot of fishing, they're probably kind of laughing a little bit because I do think as soon as you add on the fishing gear and stuff, maybe you're no longer in that true ultralight game, like the total dirt bags that are basically carrying a day pack for backpacking trips kind of thing, which is awesome. But like Danny was saying earlier, I think if you can really, really minimize the stuff that you do bring that's not fishing related, then when you do add on the fishing gear, it's manageable. The stuff that's not fishing that we like to pare down are basically just bare essentials for clothes. The stuff that you're wearing on the hike after that, I bring a puffy jacket and a rain jacket. That's about it. Unless there's like serious inclement weather. Toiletries are toothbrush and a little mini thing of toothpaste is about it. And after that, food and water. The other thing with water too, that if you're backpacking in an area that has a lot of water sources along the way, I basically never really carry water with me. I'll just kind of drink it when I'll go filter and then drink water at a little stop, and then maybe have like half a liter on me in between or whatnot. But if there are water sources nearby and you're hiking along a river or something, you can kill a lot of weight by electing to not carry, 3 liters of water the entire time on your back.
Yeah, that's fair, man. I mean, some of the stuff that I'm hiking on a regular basis is like I may be a couple hours out from a water source and sucking down a whole bunch of water on account of trying to haul my 220-pound ass up a mountain. But same thing. I mean, every liter of water weighs about 2.2 pounds. I mean, it gets pretty heavy when you're carrying a bunch of it. Getting stuck with water obviously is bad news for you, but also carrying a bunch of weight you don't need can be tough. So I kind of scale it up and down as needed. When you're doing that, are you using, talk to me about your filtration system. You have one of those Grail bottles that you're just dipping in there and drinking out of, or are you stopping and actually doing the whole filter thing while you're there, or how do you manage it?
We love the Sawyer Squeeze. So we just bring smart water bottles. They're really light and indestructible. And then you can screw one of the Sawyer Squeezes right on one. Keep one as your kind of dirty bottle that you dip in and get the water in. And then when you need bigger carries, I think I have a it's called like a platypus thing. It can carry 2 liters of water in addition. So all told, I think I had 4 liters of water storage potential. And that filter is only a couple ounces, super light.
Yeah, and if you keep those filters clean, like the filtering process is pretty quick. You stop and it takes about a minute maybe to filter a liter of water, if that.
Yeah, a lot of people don't do the backwash in those things very often, and then they slow to a trickle, and it's like 30 minutes of you sitting there beating on the bag with a stick to try to get
Oh,
it to work. But yeah, no, you're right. So talk to me a little bit about how the company got started. I'm going to preface this with a little bit of a soapbox, which is that I kind of want to talk to you two about what I call the struggle, right? Which is the fly fishing itself. If you're just going down the road and hopping into the river, is easy, right? I mean, you throw your stuff in the truck, you hop out, you grab your chest pack or your hip pack or whatever, and one rod, and you're ready to rock. And that's all you have to think about. But once you get into the backcountry game, now you're talking about hiking, you're talking about backpacking, you're talking about camping, you're talking about all this other stuff that goes along with it. And it's, I don't know, maybe we're just not normal, but it's not a very common thing for people to do. And as a result, you sort of live in this place where you're at the middle of a Venn diagram across all these different outdoor disciplines, all of which have really good gear, right? Ranging from like crappy, cheap stuff that you probably don't want to use to pretty good stuff at the top end. But very little of it really works together, right? And there've been some like early efforts with this, like Fish Pond has kind of played around with stuff that sort of looks like maybe backcountry fly fishing integrated systems. But I find that over the years, I've tried most of that stuff. And what I've wound up doing is stitching together gear from, a variety of backpacking companies and hiking companies and camping companies and fishing companies into something that works for me, eventually. But it took me a long time to get somewhere where it worked for me. And I think a lot of people, they would love to go do this stuff, but they get stuck on the fact that there's no like easy solution. You're going to have to go learn all of this stuff about all these different disciplines and then get all the different gear and then, paper mache and duct tape that thing together into a workable system when you're out there. I'm guessing you guys had the same issue. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that. And by extension, what kind of inspired you to start Colter Backcountry?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you totally hit the nail on the head with that. Prior to like starting this business and trying to make our own gear, we were basically in a situation where, we had full fly setups. We did a ton of fly fishing, but you look at the gear you have and you're like, okay, well, this is the stuff that I use to fish. And if I were to put all this stuff into a backpack, it would like fill the entire backpack. And, a lot of companies, like you said, do make stuff that's a little bit more minimalist. But I think the problem is that the gear they make, they want to make sure that people can use, in the I'm fishing a big river out of my truck situation too. So it's never like perfectly designed for backpacking. It's like a little bit smaller than the other things they have, but still like takes up a lot of bulk and a lot of volume and whatnot. So for example, back in the day when I had my full just fly fishing kit, it'd be like, all right, well, I've got my boots, I've got my waders, the pack I have, is like a full hip pack kind of thing. And that alone is going to take up half my backpack. And so, yeah, just kind of infeasible, I guess, to truly use that stuff. And then you're in a situation where it's like, well, I could just leave it behind, but then I have nothing to fish out of, right? Then now I'm fishing out of my pockets or something like that, or I leave a net behind, but now what do I do when I hook an 18-inch fish in the lake? Like I'm not really going to be able to land that without a net, kind of thing. So these were all thoughts that we had. I guess kind of the genesis of the company. When you're out hiking for 5 months, you got a lot of thinking time to go through. So we were batting around all sorts of ideas. At the time I left, I worked in the corporate world for a couple of years and kind of used the hike as a little break and wasn't really sure what direction I wanted my career to go in. And we basically felt like really strongly that there was this opening in the fly industry in particular that like no one's making gear specifically for backpacking. I think that's a total opportunity for business to fill, and kind of just took the plunge. Like we were going to start designing stuff and we're basically going to go like pain point by pain point. We can't bring this, so let's come up with an alternative solution and go from there. That was how the business began. It has been a steep learning curve, I'll say. We don't have a background in basically any of the stuff that we're required to do. Mechanical engineering, actual like production, sourcing, logistics, supply chain, like all of that we've had to learn from the ground up. And we are still very much in the learning process, but we're starting to put things together, I think, which is exciting.
Yeah, I've always wondered about that, right? I mean, I think even simple products, because I'm not a very smart man, but occasionally I'll be walking around out there and I'll be like, man, it would be nice if this existed, and I'll kind of chew on it for a bit, and every now and then I'll spin on that and think, well, maybe I could make it. And then you look at what that requires, right? I mean, all the things that you mentioned, you got to come up with some way to draw that thing out. You got to be able to prototype it. You've got to have people who are willing to look at the prototype and test it for you to make sure it doesn't suck. Because one of the other things that I've learned, and it's probably true for you guys too, I mean, it's an intensely personal thing, and I might be a weirdo, right? Like there's certain ways that I set up my gear that I like that another person would be sort of, hell no, I would never do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so finding something that would actually work for those folks. And then, yeah, the process of actually putting that thing together, sourcing the materials, getting it manufactured, getting it distributed. That's a crazy thing. And it's interesting to think about how these sort of really simple ideas. And one of the things I really like about the products that you guys are putting out there is that they're really super duper simple, which is the point, right? Simple and easy and light. But they're not super duper simple to make. And I don't know if a lot of people who do fly fishing or do backcountry fly fishing really think about all the stuff that goes into it. So maybe you could dive in a little bit more into some of those challenges and just the process of you identify a pain point, like you said, you think you've got a solution, and then you're putting together an innovative solution to that problem. I'd love to hear more about just kind of how that works.
Yeah, well, our net was really the first thing that we worked on. Kind of this first big idea of, we know the nets out there are big. Bulk is a huge thing when you're backpacking, stuff. You only have so much room in your pack. It's not necessarily weight, but bulk is often kind of this limiting factor. And so we we had this idea, what if you had a net that was just as good as kind of your front country net, and really usable, but that you'd have in the backcountry. And, like Patrick was saying, we didn't have much of that background of, we're not, industrial engineers, mechanical engineers. So we ended up working with this great engineering firm out in Salt Lake City. And so we kind of stumbled across, like, I don't know, Patrick did a lot of the kind of research in the internet, trying to find, what kind of people do know these things, who knows how to design things, how to manufacture them, and trying to kind of build up a network of contacts. And some kind of things led to dead ends, and other things led to kind of great people who we've developed good relationships with and have worked with a lot since then. So that was kind of that process of kind of figuring out where the answers are, and then kind of trying to make it happen by working with them.
Yeah, and there's this whole interesting process too, where you can essentially design anything that you can conceive of in your mind on a computer, but that doesn't mean that you can actually make it in the real world. And also, once you find something that you can make in the real world, that doesn't mean you can make it profitably. So that's like a whole nother venture in and of itself. Something that we're trying really hard to do is all of our products are made in the US right now. So a challenging aspect for us was to find a company that could build the molds required for the net in the United States and also shoot them here. So we were able to find a great partner. They're also in Salt Lake City. Work really well with them. We use Contract Sewer in California for our soft goods. And ultimately, it's a ton of back and forth. Once you are getting close to what you think is a final prototype, it might be months or even close to a year after that of refining features. And this didn't quite work, or we think we're close, but we tested this and we don't like this aspect of it. Now we got to go back to the drawing board, and that's going to cost more. So how do we compensate for that? It's been a very, very interesting process for sure.
Yeah, I bet. And I wonder if maybe we could zoom in on the net a little bit, because I know that that's kind of your flagship product right now. I mean, I've had the same Fish Pond Nomad net. It's a mid-length net. It's absurdly big for hiking around with, but I love the thing, and it's been all over the place with me. So I still carry it. But it gets hung up in trees every 5 seconds. It's probably going to break eventually. It works. And like I said, I've stitched together a system that makes it work. But it might not be the most ideal thing if you're trying to do something more convenient or more comfortable, especially if you're bushwhacking. So tell us a little bit about the net, because it's a pretty cool product.
Yeah, so the net we basically call it a collapsible net. It goes into two pieces. So you got your standard handle piece that has a couple prongs on the end of each handle. and those prongs then feed into a little recess in the frame component. So it kind of sticks in there. And then the netting itself is adhered to the hoop with 550 paracord, so a strong paracord. And then that kind of pulls through and tightens everything. And there's a little capture feature on the back of the handle that pulls the netting taut and keeps the handle connected to the frame. So super easy setup. You know, you can collapse it in a few seconds. Comes in a little mesh carrying case that's durable. And yeah, I mean, the idea was basically we want something that's super compact so that you can easily store it inside your backpack. So you're not getting hung up everywhere you hike, but it also needs to be something that you can like super quickly assemble and disassemble.
Yeah, it looks like an awesome product. To be honest with you, I've been meaning to order one because I'd like to try it out. Having something you can stuff in your backpack, I think this might be true for you all too, but the longer I do this, there are certain things you got to hang on the outside of your pack, and that's just the way it is. But if I don't have to, I'd rather not, because it just decreases the likelihood of losing it or dropping it or getting stuck on something. And there is very little more frustrating than getting the net hung up on a tree. I actually have like 4 holes in my net right now. I have to completely redo the basket because it just it sucks. And that's like 3 or 4 times a summer. I probably change my net basket literally 3 times a year just from that alone. So it's an awesome idea and a cool product.
Yeah, the name of the net is actually the thoroughfare net, which to listeners who are unfamiliar, it's a region in Yellowstone, kind of the southeast corner of the park, that's known as like the most remote part of the lower 48, the furthest from a road. And so we really like that name as kind of this aspirational kind of backcountry spot.
All right, so tell me a little bit about the people who are interested in these products, right? Because I think one of the more interesting things about the business that you guys have started is that I've never really been able to get a read on how many people do this backcountry fly fishing thing, right? And certainly, I think there are people who like a couple times a year go for a hike to a high alpine lake and hope for the best. And then there's a bunch of people who do it a little bit more seriously, but they're not super serious. And then there are, like totally crazy people who are taking a podcast call right outside of Estes Park so they can go solo backpack for 3 days, right? Which is a different class of angler. And I guess I'm curious about, as you're getting these products out there, you're selling them, you're testing them, you're talking to folks. Tell me a little bit about the demographic of people who are getting into this backcountry thing, because it's relatively new. I mean, they're old, crazy guys that have been doing it for 50 years, of course, but it seems like it's really started to explode and take off just in the last 4 or 5 years, or at least that's the way that it seemed to me. And I'm interested in who the people are and what you guys are hearing out there on the customer side.
Yeah, so I think a lot of these people are kind of hiding in plain sight. It was hard going in to know like what the market size was. I think we have a pretty good network between the two of us of people who are into these kinds of things. And so we had a hunch that a lot of people are interested in this style of fishing. And the more I've gotten into it, the more I've learned that there is a sizable number of people that are fishing in the backcountry. And, I'm sure it's no surprise to you or anyone else that the fly fishing industry as a whole is trending a lot younger these days. It's no longer the old professor smoking a pipe out on a chalk stream in England kind of thing. There's a lot of young guys who are into fly fishing. It's kind of in some corners of the world become a cool thing to do amongst younger people, and that's definitely like the demographic that's driving the backcountry fishing corner of the industry. Kind of the 25 to 35-year-olds are who we get the most business from. People who are into that kind of thing. And then there's also another angle. There's this whole world of people that are really experienced backpackers, and they do a lot of backpacking, and they don't know that much about fishing, but, they come across all these lakes and rivers, and they're like, oh, I kind of wish I could fish or whatever. And so they sort of get into it from the opposite angle, where they're not anglers first. They're, primarily just hardcore backpacking travelers, and they're looking for something that'll help them fish along the way. And so we've seen a lot of customers from that segment too.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to talk about. I mean, I think you hit it early on. There are more people fly fishing than ever before. It used to be years ago, you could go to even some of the busier rivers, and if you went at the right time, you still might not see anybody, right? Or you're not going to have somebody stacked up on you. Now, I see more people out there than ever before. I mean, it's not uncommon to go to some of those bigger name tailwaters and have people stacked up every 50 feet, right? Or even less than that if you're not lucky. So
Yeah.
a lot of fly anglers, I mean, they're interested in the adventure aspect, but they're also just sick of crossing lines with, Gunther down the road. So it drives them in that way. But I have always wondered how many people come in from the other angle, the backpacking angle, because it's a really interesting sort of mingling of disciplines there. And I think probably the same mindset and the same basic approach, same basic love for the wilderness and being outside, but then sort of deepening for them. That's cool that you're grabbing folks from that segment, because I've always hoped that, and this is no disrespect to people who come into the sport fresh and new, right? There's nothing wrong with it, but I like to see experienced outdoors people come into it, because I think they come into it with a baseline level of respect and understanding and appreciation for these places that not everybody who picks up a fly rod for the first time has, to be perfectly honest. So that's awesome that you're working with that segment.
Yeah, definitely. It's cool I mean, people who hunt and fish kind of already understand this, but when you're pursuing an animal of some kind in the wild, I think that your relationship with the wild area you're in is just so much more enhanced. There's so much more that goes into it as opposed to just like walking through a place. And, nothing wrong with just going out hiking and backpacking. That's awesome too. But I think once people kind of dip their toes into the more hunting, fishing side of things, in addition to the backpacking they may be doing, they just really get into it, because you learn so much more about the areas you're in, way more about the ecology, the biology, and it kind of makes outdoor experiences a bit more meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the trick. Number one, I mean, if I'm being honest, I enjoy hiking, but I don't know that I would do it if I didn't have an objective, right? So like sometimes I'll get invited to go for a hike and people are like, hey, we're going to go do this thing. And I'm like, I don't know, are there fish up there, right? I have to kind of think about it before I go, because I like the objective. But you're also right. I mean, there's a difference between looking at an ecosystem or a place and interacting with the ecosystem. And I think when you're out there fishing or hunting, I don't hunt personally, but it's kind of the same thing. When you're touching it and feeling it, you do have to understand it at a different level. And that's it's cool to see folks come from a general appreciation of the outdoors into a more specific, and I think kind of a more intimate appreciation for what's really happening around them, particularly in the streams. And we won't get political today, but especially today, it's good for folks to understand what those places are and how they work and how important they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So tell me a little bit about the kinds of places that you fish, right? So Patrick, you're getting ready to go stomp around in Rocky Mountain. You guys have done the CDT, but I also have seen posts from you fishing kind of all over the place. So talk to me about how often you're out there, some of your favorite trips, what you like the best. Just hit me with the backcountry story here.
So I'm living in California right now. I'm out in the Bay and pretty new to the state. So got here about 2 years ago to do grad school, and I'm really exploring what kind of this state has to offer right now. So a lot of stuff in the Sierra. There's some pretty big fish in some of the systems, particularly that have lakes. So it's a lot of fun. Certain times of the year you can go to the streams or go fish these lakes and find some big browns in some spots. California has a lot of. I've always really been into the native trout kind of world. Back even before the CDT, I did this long road trip where I caught most of the species of trout out west. And so, yeah, there's just lots of really unique native trout places in these kind of isolated drainages, whether that's kind of the Cloud River red bands or kind of the whole golden trout world and stuff. And so there's just a lot to explore on that end. And it's kind of fun because, you can chase after these beautiful natives, or then there's also spots where you can really hunt that trophy, the backcountry. And both are a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would say in general, we're fans of fishing anywhere where there aren't roads on a map. Yeah, a few years ago, we did a pretty sweet trip. I was living in Arizona at the time, which is where the business originally started. But we did like I don't know, 7 or 8 days in the Arizona backcountry. So we were up in kind of the Apache Gila trout range, which are two really cool endemic species up there. I think we did about 60 miles that was almost all off trail. So just exploring canyons, some rugged forests, and just some tough country. So, some of those trips, there's usually a lot of pain associated with that kind of thing, especially when you're going off trail, but usually the rewards are epic. You get to see some stuff that not a lot of people get back to. So that one in particular sticks out to me a couple years ago.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, actually. So we've been kind of talking about the West, right? I mean, Daniel, you're in California. Patrick, you said you were in Arizona. Are you in Utah now? Do I remember that right?
I was very recently living in California, kind of looking to relocate right now. So maybe out Colorado somewhere. We'll see how things shake out.
So one of the more interesting things for me has been the regional divide when it comes to the podcast. So I've had a lot of folks in the West who are like, yeah, man, I totally get it and I appreciate it and it's great. And I'm out there hitting high alpine lakes and these deep rugged canyons and it's just we're having a ton of fun. And then I'll get an email from like a guy in Pennsylvania, right? Or one of my favorites was from a guy in Alabama. He was like, we just don't have this stuff over here. I mean, they still have fly fishing. You can fly fish anywhere there are fish. It doesn't even have to be for trout, obviously. But, backcountry means different things to different people. And I think by virtue of that, it demands different gear and different setups for different people in different areas. And I guess I'm curious from a business perspective, but also just from your perspective as folks who have kind of been around and traveled quite a bit, what you see is some of those regional distinctions, right? Between somebody who's hitting like the Adirondacks versus somebody who's somewhere in the Rockies or the Sierras or whatever. Because there's a divide kind of right about at the Mississippi River. It starts looking different probably before then. If we want to talk about Kansas and Missouri and Nebraska, I feel terrible for those people, but everybody else is it looks different. East Coast backcountry is not the same as West Coast backcountry or Western backcountry. And I wonder how that plays out with your business and with your fishing.
Yeah, so first off, we both grew up in Kansas City, but yeah, no, a majority of like our customers are definitely out west, but there is quite a bit of interest too in the East Coast. Of like, there's a strong cultural blue lining there. You talk about states like Pennsylvania or Virginia or the Carolinas and stuff, and there are definitely people who are just exploring small water that has really cool native fish in it, and it looks a little bit different, obviously, than the huge vistas across the West, and you're not playing in giant tracts of public land necessarily, but I think there's still people who are getting out there, putting in miles, and finding places that like aren't really that fished. I think it just looks a little different maybe. But growing up in Missouri, like we know down in southern Missouri, there's just beautiful trout streams, and it's different than the West, obviously. But you can definitely get lost in some pretty cool stuff no matter where you are, I think.
That's interesting. I've never known that about me. You're actually the second person who's been on the podcast who's told me that Missouri is like this secret trout heaven that nobody's ever heard of. So one of these days, I'm gonna have to get out there and see if it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about some of the other products that you guys have. I mean, obviously you've got the net. We've chatted about that, but you've also been working on some pretty nifty, sort of low weight, easy to use solutions for fly fishers who don't want to carry a whole bunch of fly boxes. I'm married to my 3 fly boxes. I'm probably never going to stop carrying them. It's more weight than I probably need to have, but I hate not being prepared, right? You get to that lake and you don't have the one pattern that you think they're going to eat. But tell me about some of the other stuff that you got out there now, and then maybe give us a little preview of some of the products that you might be looking at down the road as you keep developing the company and putting stuff out in the market.
Yeah, so our other main product out right now is called our Clip Kit. So what this is, we kind of think of it like a fishing wallet. So it's basically everything but the flies. We have it's just a little kit, maybe I don't know, about 5 by 8 or so. Has a big fly patch on there, and then it has room for like this locking construction so that you can easily open it up with one hand and close it with one hand. It's all magnetic and won't open up on you, but it can keep your floatants, a couple of tippets, just spare leaders, your forceps, some nippers, just all the tools you need. So we kind of think about this as kind of your working toolkit when you fish. I think it's great in a lot of different scenarios. When you're backcountry fishing, you don't need too much in the way of like, you're not probably gonna be switching out from crazy leader systems. You're not rigging up some Euro nonsense or anything like that. You're just gonna.
You don't need to do that anywhere, even not in the backcountry. I'm sure somebody's going to fight me for it, but you don't have to do that at all. I agree.
But yeah, no, that's like kind of just the stuff you need for day fishing, kind of outside your flies. And I like it. I put my flies on my fly patch, particularly when I'm doing like wade fishing streamers or something. It's really good for that. It's good for a lot of warm water stuff too. So it has applications outside the backcountry as well. But the idea you'd bring that and then you maybe have your couple boxes that you keep along too.
Yeah, something that we like to think about when backpacking is that the easiest way to cut weight is to not have a place to put something. So, like if you have a brain on your backpack, take the brain off, and then you're not going to be tempted to fill it with shit. Um, Kind of the same thing when it comes to this clip kit. The idea was, if you have like one of those chest rigs or something, realistically, that has 10 times the storage for what you actually are going to be fishing with that day. So why don't we just completely pare that down into something that only holds the things that you're actually going to bring? So that was kind of the idea behind that. It's pretty handy because we call it a clip kit. It has these two clips, these two metal buckles on the back that will clip into basically anything. So if you're just wearing shorts, they'll go on top of your shorts. If you have a belt, they'll clip on there. Or if you're wearing waders, they'll slide onto the top of a pair of waders.
Yeah, that's awesome because sort of like with everything else, most of that stuff's just not made for it. I mean, I had a little Fish Pond Canyon Creek chest pack that I used forever. It was the smallest fishing chest pack that I could possibly get. And it was fine except for the fact that I wear it as a hip pack and then it gets wet because it's too big and then all my stuff is wet and my flies are wet and I'm far too OCD to live with that. So I swapped it out for the Thunderhead and I like it. It's a great, but it's huge, right? I mean, I have 3 fly boxes, I have a thermometer, and then I have like some nippers and some forceps and some tippet on the bottom, and that's it. And I'm probably using a third of the space in there, if that. And I made it work. I've slapped it. I clip it to the outside of my backpack and it functions. But it doesn't function as well as it probably could. So it's awesome that you guys are looking at that and thinking about solutions to it.
Yeah, upcoming, kind of looking down the road, the thing that we're super excited about is we're getting pretty close to coming out with a ultralight rod tube. So another pain point for us, and a lot of people run into this, is that like rod tubes are just heavy. Even if you have the aluminum ones, those are heavy enough. But not to mention if you have like the old canvas zipper top ones. And so people are always in a situation where, do I bring the rod tube or do I bring my rod with no tube and it might get crushed if I step on it, kind of thing. So we're coming out with something that is about half the weight of a standard rod tube. And it's going to be able to hold 2 rods too, which is also something. We'll have a rod sock that holds 2 rods. We always bring 2 rods if we're doing a serious fishing trip. But about half the weight and every bit as durable. So we're super stoked on that and hoping to get that to market soon.
You have to keep me posted on that one, man, because that's like one of my top wish list items. I mean, I carry canvas rod tubes so I don't get struck by lightning because I spend a lot of time hanging above tree line and I don't like having metal stuff sticking off my back. But yeah, it's a struggle, right? You got to have 2 rods. I will go to my grave believing you got to have 2 rods with you, or else you're going to have a bad day sooner or later. But carrying them it's a thing, and strapping them to the outside of your pack, just for anybody listening. Don't do that. You don't want to be that good. You are going to break the rod 100%. I don't know if it'll be this trip, but it's going to happen and it's going to suck. You get to the top. I've been there. Do you have a timeline on that one? Do you guys know when you're thinking about bringing that out?
As soon as we can. This has been in the works for years now. We've been playing around with different designs and different ideations of this idea for a long time, but we're hopeful we're getting close, but don't have a date on the calendar yet.
Hopefully this fall. We'll see.
All right. So I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this question, which makes it kind of unfair, but you guys have spent a lot of time outside. You're obviously thinking really deeply about how to do this backcountry fly fishing thing. If you had to pick a couple or 3 tips that you think that the average backcountry fly fisher, whether he's doing day hikes up to high alpine lakes or a few day backpacking trip along a stream or in a canyon, wherever he might be, if you were talking to you back before you knew what you were doing, or me back before I knew what I was doing, I might still not know what I'm doing. So throw me into the pot too. What would you say? What's the advice that you would leave folks with about how to do this thing?
I would say don't complicate things. a lot of people who haven't been backpacking before, maybe they're interested in getting into the backcountry fishing game. Like the idea of backpacking, I think is super daunting to a lot of people. But what I always tell everyone, and I guided for years as a backpacking guide, and I would always tell like newbie guests that backpacking is literally nothing more than walking, eating, and sleeping. And you're probably an expert at all three of those things already. So don't be intimidated by it. The setting is different, and yeah, there's some, don't be irresponsible. You need to be up to speed on how to go about things in a safe manner, but like you shouldn't be intimidated by the process. You have everything you need on your back, and don't let like the fear of it being this like kind of scary thing keep you from getting out there and doing it. Because I think once people throw a pack on and get a night under their belts, they're going to get way more comfortable with it and realize that at its core, it's super simple.
Yeah, my tip was going to be kind of along those lines of just kind of there's lots of levels of these things, you know. There's you can hike 3 miles up a trail and camp at a lake a lot of places, and that's like an awesome open air trip. Or, you can go down some crazy ridge line and drop down to some lake that has no trails anywhere near it. But just like, yeah, people should really kind of stick within their comfort zones for they know, for like safety and also just to have fun out there. I mean, you can go on trips that just, if you're not prepared for it, if you're not physically fit, if you're not kind of experienced enough, just aren't going to be fun, and you're not going to want to keep doing it. So kind of just keep doing things at that level of like, what's your frontier of what you're kind of comfortable with, but would feel like kind of a cool adventure. And then the more trips you get under your belt, the more experience, the more you get your kit dialed in, the more you've kind of worked through problems when you're out there, the more, yeah, kind of willing you're going to be able to do and ready to do kind of more adventurous stuff. So yeah, don't take it too easy. It's all fun, even if it's just something really small. So yeah.
I'll share a little secret too. This is less of a tip, but those who do backcountry fishing are familiar. Generally, there are two types of fisheries. There are those that are super easy to get to, and the fishing is typically quite challenging. And then there are those that are very hard to get to, and the fishing is generally a lot easier. So a little plus if you're willing to put in some miles. Oftentimes, not always. Often you might run into some challenging stuff, but oftentimes the fishing can be wide open and super super fun if you get farther from a trailhead.
Yeah, I completely agree. In fact, I've gotten to a point where if I see anybody out there, I'm kind of disappointed that it doesn't totally ruin my day, but I'm like, oh man, I was really hoping not to see anybody here. I think what you said, Daniel, is really important on a couple of fronts. The first one is that it doesn't have to be crazy, right? I think some people hear backpacking and they're thinking about what you guys did on the CDT, right? And number one, not everybody has 5 months to go and do that. Number two, even if they did, they might be kind of put off by the amount of work and planning and effort that goes into it. There's something to be said for just working your way up to it. Like you said, hiking a few miles in and camping, especially if you're doing it alone and you're getting used to backpacking solo, which is a different experience than backpacking with other people, because you just don't have a fallback. You've got to be self-sufficient. But those kind of easier trips are still backpacking. They're still backcountry, and they're still a lot of fun, and they're a good way to work your way up to it. And going along with that, kind of tagging on to what Daniel said, it's okay to be wrong about stuff. And in fact, you're going to be wrong about stuff a lot when you first start doing this. I certainly was. I'm still wrong about stuff now. I mean, I go through my pack every season when backpacking season starts, and I look through it and I'm like, why do I have this? And what's that thing? And why don't I replace this thing with that? And it's a learning process. And I think if we're honest, that's kind of the fun part of it, for me, at least. I mean, it's fun to dial in your gear. It's fun to figure out what you like and what you don't like. And once you get the system, the kind of one ring to rule them all, it's an awesome feeling. And then you're ready to go out and do whatever you want, longer trips, solo trips, deeper wilderness. But don't be afraid to take the first step. I think that's a really, really good point. And it's one that stops a lot of people. A lot of people just don't do it because they don't want to do the first time. But first time is the toughest. And then after that, it's all learning.
Yep.
I will also add one more thing. Patrick was saying a lot of these lakes are kind of really easy fishing when you get to them. And that's true. And there's no fish in them, So a tip I'll also add is, do your research. Most state fish and game departments have a lot of great information out there about their fisheries. They have stocking records. Some lakes are fishless. Some places up in the Sierra Nevada, they killed off the lakes for this frog conservation that they were doing with the, I think, Sierra yellow-legged frog. So yeah, not everywhere has fish. A lot of places don't naturally have fish, don't have natural reproduction or whatever. So yeah, just do a little research, and there's a lot of great resources out there to do so.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than getting up to a lake that you've been looking at for a couple of years and finding out that there's nothing in it. I've been that guy, and sometimes be aware of this too. When you look up those records, we'll just throw in an extra tip. Don't just look at the stocking record, because they may have flown an airplane over it and dumped a bunch of fingerlings in there at some point. But if that lake is only like 20 feet deep, I guarantee you those fish are dead, at winter killed. And I learned that pretty early on in my backcountry experience, where I'd find these beautiful lakes. I'd pull the stocking records. I'd go up there, and it was, fishing with ghosts for 2 days straight, which still beautiful, still outside, but I wouldn't recommend it if you're trying to fly fish. Yeah, it's a good point. All right, guys. So if somebody wanted to learn more about your company or find your products or any of that stuff, where should they go? How do they get with you?
Yeah, so they can go to colterbackcountry.com. We're also active on social media. Colter Backcountry is our handle. I'll also throw out a little plug here for a program we're super excited about. I don't know if you've heard about this yet, Ross, but we, I've worked in the outdoor industry doing some other stuff, so I was exposed to the idea of a pro deal. So for those who don't know, a lot of people who are industry professionals get deals across the board on brands. And kind of our core customers are sort of more like DIY, do-it-yourself people that are experts in what they do, and they're typically not recognized in the same way. Like, they're often not eligible for pro deals. So we started a program, we're calling it a challenge program, where we have a long list of fishing and backpacking related challenges. And if you complete one of those challenges, it corresponds to a discount on our gear. So, we know fishing gear is expensive. We try to make it accessible to people, and we think that's a cool way to kind of build up the backcountry community in general. But you can see all that and more at colterbackcountry.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, guys. I really appreciate you hopping on. Love seeing the pictures of where you're going. Patrick, I'm looking forward to those pictures from Rocky Mountain. So make sure you take some good ones, man. And appreciate you guys being with me this morning.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Thank you, Ross.
Okay, that'll do it for today. We've been talking to Patrick Bowman and Daniel Bowman from Colter Backcountry. Really enjoyed talking to these two guys. I think they're really interesting guys just in general. They're awesome outdoorsmen. And I think what they're trying to do with their company is really special and pretty cool and very needed. So if you're looking for some gear, make sure that you check them out. In the meantime, I hope you are having an awesome week and enjoying the back half of August here. We are coming up on fall fishing, so make sure you're squeezing every last drop out of the summer that you can. I know I'm going to be doing that. And with that in mind, I'm going away so I can go fishing. So you guys take care. I'll see you back here real soon. Until next time, this is Ross. Maybe I'll see you out there. I just hope you don't have a fancier travel net than I do.